golden tip of web, somewhere both high and thick, no matter. What's great is actually North Wales. I used to come over to town on holiday. But the easiest done is that the high point was when I entered the prime personal secret competition at Dublin. And did you know? Unfortunately, rather not only, I broke my circular glasses. We hear the request of Father to do it. Far from a high-end gallery as Philip Morgan, you hunt for art treasures online. Here's a brand new painting, which we bought on eBay, which is a pretty bold move given how many clicks we just got out there. Well, that's a pastime living with risk, but I was interested to know what it's turned up. There's COVID restrictions stop us meeting in the farmhouse. We've been offered sanctuary in the local church. Hello, dear. Oh, very nice to meet you. And nice to meet you as well. We've arranged to look at some of these paintings. I never dared by taking on either. Don't you see yes? The painting, yes. And I'm immediately reminded of how shark infested these waters can be. This is classic in final line literature. You can take it in by a painting that was designed to look like an old painting. But is that wandering Christ? What about it? The date of the painting? I'm afraid it's not as it should be. That's really disappointing. This is a classic trapper in that way. We call them trappers. You know, and the tip your eye, you get excited, you feel done, you bring it home, and Bob's not your uncle. Little knowledge is a dangerous thing, perhaps. Despite the setback, you had another picture he's particularly excited about. The painting was set I saw it online, and you can see the oil sketching beneath, which is really quite well done. The Last Supper, big subject. This is one of the most recognizable scenes in Western art. Christ at the center, with the apostles reacting to the shocking news that he will soon die. The bread and the wine, familiar symbols of his sacrifice. And Judas, shown wrestling with a decision to betray his master. And his research extends to apostle artists. I think it's strange in the West. He started painting in America, and then he came to this country. Benjamin West claimed he first learned to paint when Native Americans showed him how to make figures from mud. After leaving America and settling in Britain, success followed quickly, and he became one of the most famous artists of the 18th century. The bold storytelling and painting captivated London. Crowds queued to see his canvases filled with moments of drama and high emotion. And his biggest fan was King George III, painted here by West. He made West his official history painter, and together they aimed to bring about a magnificent new era in British art. During the 20th century, many of West's works left Britain and are now in the museums and galleries of America. I wonder what makes you think that this rather dark and damaged-looking painting could be an overlooked West. Sometimes it is what it's like to do with that kind of thing. There's no idea the condition of your life that's problematic. It's true, actually, I'm saying West. Yeah, I mean that from an archaeological point of view, from a commercial point of view as well. So how much did you pay for it? Well, you have to take online for £50 to start with, and what was it, £50? Well, what £50 is a hard starting point here. This is like, I suspect, to someone who feels attached to this type of artist subject matter, £30,000, possibly more. Yeah? Well, I don't see you. Yes. I want to take a moment to get to know this painting. Look at what really intrigues me about Hugh's picture. How was it brought out of it? Catholic. I was an author across the border in Liverpool, and I'm used to this image, this story narrated in the New Testament, pictorially, quite like this. There's a sort of journalistic energy to this transition. Christ is in the middle, but then the disciples are grouped on the left and the right. They're huddled, they're discussing, they're talking, and then there's the technique itself. There's a sort of softness, a sort of rather burnished quality. Look how the painter has modulated composition. So your eye goes from light to dark, to turns to the word for chiaroscuro. But like Quimby said, this is not a fully resolved painting. It's work in progress. Work that is, I think, unquestionably a stretch. Despite the fact that there's so much going for it, there are aspects of painting that worry me. There are areas. They've been sprung, got at by some failed restoration process. Find that a bit disturbing. One thing that's also slightly worrying is I cannot see a signature. Now, West was one of those artists who loved even to self-promote, just loved leaving a signature on it. I would like to have found that. That would have been quite reassuring, like a sort of hallmark of a piece of silver. That would have been rather useful. And perhaps I shouldn't be motivated in so simplistic a way. It would be wonderful. A £50 eBay purchase, which was genuinely worth Benjamin West. I want to know if you can throw any light on who owns this painting before. What did you manage to find out about the prognosis? Well, what Stella did say that the painting had been in storage for 60 years, and it belonged to his wife's father. Previously, it belonged to an old woman in a big house who paid his and all the debt for some building work to found a gentleman. And what about the country in Syria, in France, yes. And that's as far back as the celebrated basically. Yes. So what we've got in this problem is you've got a fellow who lives in Surrey, yeah, which has been in storage for 60 years. Yes. He and his wife had inherited it from his wife's father. Yeah. And the father got it for payment for a building job. Right. Instead of getting money, he got this payment. Yeah. Probably worthless. So it might turn out that the painting that they thought was worthless actually really do art. Yeah, I found something that could be very valuable, you know. Hopefully. I did message him after buying the painting, and he said, well, if it's worth $1 million, please don't tell me. He's always done. That was quite good humor about it. I mean, what's up after that? There's something called oh, yeah. There's some work to be done, I think. So that's what we're here for, yes, to do that way. Yeah. And if we do manage to transform your eBay bargain into a genuine way, you can return it, you can use it. Well, things like this can be life-changing. I think how farming is a very big area in this Northern. Oh, yeah. People would be told if it's genuine. It's going to be a question. To begin my investigation into these paintings, I'm heading to another church, slightly larger this time, the Chapel of St. Peter and Paul in Greenwich. I need to find out more about West and whether the Last Supper was a subject he ever painted. To help with my research, I arranged to meet Desmond Shaw Taylor. Desmond, hello. Good to see you. He's the most recent surveyor of the Queen's Pictures, a position West once held in the court of George III. We're meeting in front of the only West work still hanging in the space it was made for, a painting of St. Paul shipwreck. This is an epic work, isn't it? Benjamin West specialized in full-scale figure painting in the great tradition of Raphael, Michelangelo. I think what he sort of adds, not perhaps you can't add enough to Raphael, Michelangelo, but what his particular take on it, I think it is very abrupt how to relate it to a little sketch that we've got. I just want to ask you some questions about that. So Devon, what we're looking at is a possible venue, like I said, for a Last Supper.
Yeah, there are actually two versions of the Last Supper that I know as audio, two really important commissions at Windsor. And the first is a new-built chapel, the Chapel of Revealed Religion. And basically, it's been telling the entire story, the Christian religion from beginning to end. And it's highly interesting to look like that. The Last Supper, sitting on the internet where Last Supper should be, it is about the wafer and the wine.
And what happened to that?
Never built. Project entirely abandoned.
So John Platt commissioned Benjamin West to paint a Last Supper for this new chapel in Windsor, which they never got built. The painting was painted.
Yes,
The tree was never on there.
absolutely.
So you mentioned two Last Suppers, what about this one?
Oh, it was created for St George's Chapel at Windsor.
And that definitely does exist. I mean, that was how they got married, and we all know that very well.
Absolutely. And I'm showing you here a watercolour of it, exactly the same picture. And it was set off by huge stained glass above, also designed by Benjamin West, showing the resurrection of Christ.
So that's an intriguing start. There's not one, but two large-scale Benjamin West Last Suppers, both altarpiece paintings fitting George III. So if he's painting the kingdom, it has to be a preparatory work for one of those. Our next job has to be to find those two large finished works.
The first one, made, never built Chapel Royal, is now in Saul's Estate. Usually I'd be rushing to see it in the flesh, but COVID shutting down museums all over the world has meant that we've had to rely on digital technology to make comparisons.
So what we now need to explore how a huge little eBay sketch could enable the preparatory for the paint picture, this monumental key composition. And at first glance, a very, very similar concept. Painted. It's the Last Supper. It's Christ at the centre, a very sacred, significant, and much more crazy. And the light is rather similar, the sense of the tent and the moon, that strong drapery of the question is how does that compare to this stuff?
Well, if I see some similarities, they're saying different to it, but I just can't. I get past. So the figure of Jesus is a really obvious one. Because so John, isn't it? He's painted with really creative. Right in the foreground, that exit right. And I presume that's really sitting there, practically in that.
And I said, I prefer it when it's there.
And then when I look at that Christ and Benjamin West painting, it's like it looks like those kind of romantic princes in a movie that looks like he's leads the charge. And you look at his face, and then you look at the one in Houston, and there is a very different place, isn't it? Older, with the weight of the world on his shoulders.
I think what you think of it, there are some fundamental differences here. Your eye goes from the divine image of Christ through to the huddled, troubled one of Judas. Not necessarily little tiny thing. There are definitely similarities. There's the same sort of, the gene pool of thinking is the same, but no, it doesn't feel like one is a sketch to the other.
So we decided Hughes' painting can't be a sketch for the 1784 Royal Chapel altarpiece painting. We have to hope that the second one is a better match.
West may have been American, but he was at the heart of the British art establishment in the 18th century, and one of the founders of the Royal Academy. Although it, like the Tate, is closed to visitors, and being allowed access to their archive by curator Annette Wilson. Hello, Fiona. Hi, Annette. Nice to see you. Wow, that is a very striking picture. West was one of the artists who successfully petitioned George III to establish the Royal His name appears in decades worth of exhibition records. I'm on the hunt for any entry that might refer to Hughes painting. The first reference I can find to the Last Supper by Benjamin West is in 1784, and this is a list of paintings exhibited at the Royal Academy in that year. And we've got here in 437, The Last Supper, a design for a picture of His Majesty's Chapel in Windsor Castle. That's the picture I looked at with Philip, that's now in the case. And we don't think that this picture is a photography sketch for that Last Supper. But what is good to know is that Benjamin West was visiting the sketches technique. The next reference I can find is a bit of a jump ahead, all the way to 1884. Now here we've got The Last Supper, the original sketch for the great picture of the communion table in a collegiate church at Windsor. Now, there are all weddings in my time, and the collegiate church is the same St. George's Chapel. So this, I think, is a sketch that we're interested in when it comes to this particular picture. What's very frustrating is, although it shows that the exhibitors had no information about its size, any dimensions at all, or any description of it. So that's encouraging and sort of frustrating in equal measure. And then finally, 1806, so another year on, again, sketched for the picture of the Last Supper, the older piece of St. George's Chapel, Windsor, Benjamin West. But no detail, no dimensions. And this is the same sketch that was shown in the previous year. So that's at least one sketch for the Royal Chapel, and we're promising there is one, possibly two for St. George's Chapel. The rest of the description makes it too vague to identify a scheme. I wonder where those sketches are today, and if one of them could be Hughes' picture.
What we do know is that there are two sketches by West for his Last Supper, which have been identified and their whereabouts are known. One for St. George's Chapel, one for the chapel that was never built. But there is possibly a third sketch that hasn't been seen or recorded for over 100 years.
And this the Last Supper sketch. And there's nothing.
Well, there are references to it from the works that West's sons inherited from him. Eventually they started selling off the work.
So this is something very possible. It could be possible. So I need to find a record of that sketch and see what I can do. So now we know West produced sketches for his two Windsor altarpiece paintings. After a bit more digging, I found out that one for the Royal Chapel and one for St. George's Chapel. Both were survived in the United States in the 20th century. But what is the third possible sketch not seen for over 100 years? Could you have found that sketch?
A missing sketch is certainly intriguing. But I still need to be sure Hughes' picture is a preparatory work for a finished painting. I located West's second order piece painting, the St. George's Chapel Last Supper. Since 1980, it's been in America at the Detroit Institute of Arts, one of the world's great art collections, and a museum I'm familiar with. But with international travel prohibited, I've arranged to see to curator Benjamin Holmes.
Ben, hi there. Well, thank you for joining us in this funny way across the Atlantic. It's always a pleasure to talk about Benjamin West, even if we need the magic of technology to make it possible right now.
I can see it behind you now. It is extraordinary. What a magnificent painting. What's also remarkable and to me very satisfying is I'm looking at the two, and the similarities are so resounding, these familiar signs that our sketch is so close to your epic work. The moon through the left-hand arch is a match. The disciples' groupings are the same. So too the cup and the bread, and most identifiably Judas is glowing at us from the front of the painting in the same way. But, we are dwarfed by yours. What a magnificent painting.
This painting has such a magnetic pull from across the room. It's the first painting that you see when you round the corner into this tremendous gallery of American art history paintings. The painting pulls you in from across the room. There's lots of contrast know, in Atkinson, who is bathed in a kind of virtuous golden light, who's cast in a sickly green shadow, you know, who the good guy is and who the bad guy is. So something I'm trying to get my head around that is, how come ours is, although the same basic colours, so much softer, the light is so much gentler than in yours? Thinking about Benjamin West as an artist who sometimes made different versions of a composition, he was very eclectic as a painter who experimented with different styles before he settled on finished work. It could just be that Benjamin West is experimenting, is thinking of an alternative idea, a different mood for the Last Supper.
There is, though, and that's a reassuring possibility.
And one of the challenges in trying to prove a West is authentic in your experience, it's a good question. Certainly, we know that West had many students and many imitators. So it certainly doesn't seem unlikely that some of West's students or some of his admirers would have made copies after such a major commission as this Last Supper for the chapel at Windsor.
So Hugh's sketch is definitely related to the St. George's Chapel Last Supper. All we must now do is prove it's a genuine preparatory work by West himself.
I'm on the hunt for more information about this missing sketch, listing the sale that West's sons held on their father's death. West was the highest paid painter of his time, and on his death in 1821, his two sons struggled to maintain the lifestyle they'd grown accustomed to. At the Paul Merlin Centre for Studies in British Art, I got a copy of that 3-day thing. So in 1829, Benjamin West's son had effectively a quiet sale of all their dad's works. It was 180 pictures, and when you get to lot 21, what we have, the study of the admired picture placed over the table of the altar of the choir of St. George's Chapel, Windsor. Now that is exciting, because a huge picture is a study by Benjamin West. It's a study for St. George's Chapel. It describes it. This altarpiece was, this is in italics, this is critically important, painted by command of His late Majesty, George III, of course. So they're throwing everything except this picture and making a big thing of that royal connection. Now, so far, I've managed to find out that Benjamin West did a number of Last Suppers, but I can't find any dimensions. Here are some dimensions. So the Last Supper is 1 foot 2 inches wide, that's 40 inches wide, and 10.5 inches high. So you compare that to Hugh's. Hugh's picture is 15.5 inches wide and 11 inches high. So it's not exactly the same, there's about 1 inch, half an inch in there. And if you think Hugh's picture is quite likely to be relined a number of times, that can change the shape of the picture. What 230 years ago, it wasn't considered as critical to be that precise about measurement as it is now. So I know it's not exactly the same, but it's so close, so massively encouraging. The question is, did it sell? If it sold, who bought it? This is an annotated version of the catalogue, and it has a list of the people who bought it. Nash. Now, when I think of Nash in the 1800s, the first thing that comes to mind is John Nash. A celebrated architect who built much of Buckingham Palace, the finest buildings in Regency London. Is it John Nash who wrote it? So what have we got? We've got a painting here that isn't exactly the same dimensions as Hughes, but it certainly describes Hughes in a dimension that art has near as done. So there's a very strong possibility this is Hughes' picture of the there. And then a buyer, Nash. Could it be John Nash? That's crazy, isn't it?
I'm keen to see what science can tell us about Hugh's picture. The surface of the painting is so dark and muddy, I can't help thinking that there's more to be revealed underneath. I've asked Professor Aviva Bernstock at the Courtauld Institute in London to take a look at it, and she's already intrigued.
How are you getting on?
I haven't seen anything like this before. It's the first time that I've seen a sketch or a design, a black and white picture that's partly painted.
Aviva's infrared imaging is able to penetrate the layers of varnish and paint to reveal the drawing lines below.
So you can see beneath that brownish coating or brownish coatings to this sketch that's underneath, which looks like it's actually two different sorts of black. It's sort of fluid black, and also these patches, which is very detailed, which are done probably in a different sort of dry medium.
That's really thrilling, because you can see now this cross-section, this energy, this activity.
Well, there are quite a few workings out in the drawing stage. For example, you can see that Price isn't holding the bread, whereas he had it on the table beforehand with a sketch down.
So it's a sort of willing, developing project.
Yeah. Well, look, there's a hand. I didn't notice that before. Do you see that? Look, there's a hand. And there's a knee.
Oh my God,
There's a lot of work out here. There's a lot more. There's a hand that goes down on the drapery, which is there. It's now holding that up.
That's right.
And then there's the knee. So he's drawing naked up his knee.
What does look and feel really distinctive are those sort of impassioned lines, and the way that the forms are coming out of this sort of thicket of pencil strokes.
It's very hard to imitate that. So if we saw it in another picture, firmly attributed to West, that would be quite good evidence of a similar hand.
So a characteristic of the artist, whoever that person may be, to me, this looks like a free-flowing work of a truly accomplished artist, not a student or faker, but if he was right, we'll have to find another example by him in order to prove that this is better than West.
I want to check back in with him and tell him where I've got to with the problem. Well, let me show you what I've done. I found records of the original sketch for St. George's Chapel. Have a look at this. Not 21 and a half, but this is from the 1729. The dimensions are almost identical to this picture. And look at the description. The study did my picture, placed it with the altar required St. George's Chapel, Windsor. So I think there's a very good chance that is his picture.
Sure. And there's the second portrait.
Well, there's his name here, Nash.
I wonder if that could be John Nash, the great architect.
Well, I wanted the same. And in the same Nash brought three Beverly West pictures. Death of Laban, Resurrection of our Saviour, and then two pictures came to be the beast and the Bible.
And what happened to come after that?
Well, on the death of John Nash committed this crime, there was a sale. And these Beverly West sketches, what I showed you just now, are in that sale. So I think we can say that the Nash of 1839 gives John Nash the architect. Sure. Frustratingly, there is no mention anywhere of the Last Supper. There's no record of it in this designation 35, and Nash's family destroyed all his personal records of the thing. His family said that, apparently. So, I better go in. With the paper trail seemingly going forward, and new strategy. Put it back as a painting, hold it in. There's a sticker here, for I to see. Expert in ancient and modern pictures. Haymarket, which is flipping again, in central London. And then, I'm trying to look at the gallery name, there's a letter, G maybe? The stickers in the letters, can't quite see what that is. What else have we got? Numbers, 372 on the canvas, possibly from Nottingham. And then above it, 405, what looks like W perhaps. This one in particular looks familiar. I think this could be a Christmas circle. We've got a sticker and we've got numbers, and those are clues, and those are something you can definitely think.
As forensic analysis continues, Aviva has made an exciting discovery about the pigments in Hugh's painting, and she's keen to share it.
These are the very, very top layers of nature. Now, with
very top layer. And what's really interesting is that you can see that there's a top layer of varnish which contains something, and I don't know how to identify it. It's this very strongly yellow fluorescent particle here. It's just one particle, and I don't know what it is. I couldn't identify it.
Okay, try this thought. We know that there's some fantastically lurid accounts of the materials we use in the etc., such as Indian yellow from the urine colours owned on mango leaves, and mummy's grounds made from real mummies excavated from the ground, in Egypt first.
I am sceptical about the material people say they use, but I have found in this cross-section new characteristic particles. Could be money, I suppose, but this fluorescent yellow area could potentially be genuine Indian yellow. Unfortunately, I can't do it because I can't identify the materials as they're all white materials, but I have a colleague who can do it.
Well, please try it, because it would be first time in fatal fortune that human remains help us with an attribution. That dirty, damaged scene under a Viva's microscope still troubles me. And I'm really concerned that Peter's condition is now holding us back. So we've asked Hugh to join us in the gallery.
Oh, hi, how are you? Nice to see you. Nice to see you as well. So Hugh, we've got a decision to make, and the question is to restore it or not. Now, what are the arguments for it?
If we're going to give this picture every opportunity, it's got to look the part, and I think there are losses here which are still problematic.
It's particularly that section at the bottom, isn't it, where either the colour never was there, or it's been avoided off or something.
And one of the things I think we've got to really get to terms with is what varnish is meant to be there and how much of it is dirt. And that is one of those things with a restorer we can really understand. I might love to find a signature, but there's still quite a lot, I think, that needs to come out. And restorers are used to doing this. It's first aid. It's not open heart surgery, but it's first aid.
I just understand the layers of caution, because in the briefing, you want to be an example. You spent 50 quid on this picture. More money will now be spent on having it restored, and there's no guarantee at the end of the day that you're a concentrating cabinet will come out and say it's a something right, so you might spend the money for nothing. So given that, are you prepared to put it for it?
It's a sort of shame, but it's pretty motivated by your business.
At least I'm going to see the stories.
I've sent Hugh's painting to Rupert First at the Hamilton Art Institute at Cambridge University. Not only is Rupert a hugely experienced restorer, he also spent many years at the Royal Collection, where they have numerous examples of West's paintings. So I'm pretty keen to hear how the painting stands up to his experienced eye. Hello, Rupert.
Hello, how are you?
So what are your first thoughts about this picture?
Well, it's a mixed bag. It's very interesting. There are features that remind me of West I've seen, but I'm not so sure about all this sort of outlining. It's slightly unusual. These don't seem going almost like a comic book style, isn't it?
It certainly is having great potential, but it's just been held back somehow. Do you think it's going to be open with the rest of the picture?
I'm pretty confident it can. And you can already see the difference in colour, so that the deep turquoisey colour of the sky is coming out. It was such a sickly green before.
So how do you make sure you only take off the dirt and not what the artist intended?
What I'm doing at the moment is just removing the natural resin, and you can tell that on the swab and using ultraviolet. So I'm not going through all the red. I certainly won't want to rush into it and clean all the way through, which is what happened before. And that's why we've ended up with this sort of aberration and damage at the bottom. But it would be,
Take my shot, you could paint on.
for example, Judith's face just reads as a sort of fuzzy blob at the moment, but just a couple of little bits of retouching, little dots to cover up those areas of
ground, and you'll see his face again, and that sort of scowl and angst or whatever.
The process of conservation takes us back to what the artists intended, and might also bring about revelations.
I'm just so thrilled if you could find a signature.
I mean, where would it be? I suppose normally you'd expect us to think along the bottom edge, but one might worry that if the signature had been there, it may no longer be there. I'm going to be looking at this painting probably for more hours than anyone since the artist painted it, I suspect. So if there is a signature somewhere, I really hope I'll be able to spot it. I've been looking into the stencils on the back of these paintings, and I thought that one of them might be from a Christie portrait. We've had some exciting news from Christie, so I've asked you to come back down to London so I can share it with you. So you didn't get the numbers on that? Yes, yeah. So 372, yeah, and 405, what looked possibly like a W, yes, it went to Christie, almost, yeah. And they said, oh, that's not 405W, that's 405B, almost. So nothing was sold through Christie. So it's recorded. So what we found out is the date of the sale that that 405 was used to purchase. Almost, yeah. Got the details here. Ancient and long pictures. The property of Serene W. Nelson, deceased. So on the third day of the sale, May 23rd, May 25, it refers to your picture, lot 451. It's a definite picture with 405B on the back, and it says, the last supper, these lot collected. That's just it. And that doesn't matter, very good. We've been talking about various sketches by Emily West. We now have information about your sketch. This is your sketch being sold by Christie and illustrated presenting an art. That's a your standing on the back, all those kind of things. Oh, and interesting here, it says signed and dated. What this tells you is there's a signature on your painting. On your sketch, so we need to find it. I mean, obviously, every time for 10 people, else, but nonetheless, so this sale is a 50 presenting work. So we know that all the items sold it. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Pat. N. Cole, Christie said N. Cole is probably Martin Cole Mackey. Who was Martin Cole Mackey? Martin Cole Mackey was a very, very well-known artist. Almost had his own talent, and he really come across talent. I'll have somebody, doesn't it? The director of something. Well, that's exactly what we're going to do. Yeah. This is a content of the thing. Good, good.
Like the rest of the world, I'm having to take up the challenge of working from home. It's been productive, and I've managed to make an exciting connection. We know Benjamin West painted at least one preparatory sketch for the St. George's Chapel altarpiece, and it went to America. I've managed to locate it, and thrillingly, it seems to have much in common with you. It was recently restored in a Australian museum in Virginia by conservator Beth Wilson.
Hi there.
Hi there, how are you today?
Very well.
I've sent Beth all of the images that Eva took of Hugh's painting, and she's shown me hers. So together, I'm hoping we can spot the same artist's hand at work. I'm now looking at the two infrareds next to each other.
Yeah,
And it's not so exciting, isn't it?
it is. We share a lot of similarities just related to drawing. You see, there are sort of sketchy lines that you make in figures to denote volume.
I couldn't agree with you more. And actually, it's almost as if you're looking at an old master craftsman.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we are going to try and prove art by Benjamin West, we have to presumably work out where it comes in relation to yours, because art is colored yours, isn't it? There are compositional elements that seem to be slightly closer to the Detroit picture, the organization of figures, the way the table is laid out.
Absolutely.
It would almost seem, therefore, that if ours is to decide, and it isn't someone just taking it, then ours is closer to being a sketch of the Detroit picture.
I would say so. I think in terms of a timeline, the Franklin sketch would come first, as he's just putting together this composition, and then he's making these changes closer to the final version.
It deals with Beth's help. It mapped out a plausible evolution to this composition, but something still concerns me. Leonard found out that Hughes is supposed to have signed, and we haven't seen any evidence of a signature. Is yours signed?
Yes, but it's not an original signature. Someone added it later.
Right. Have you any idea when that might be?
The ink is fairly soluble based on the test that we did. So my guess is that it was added sometime in the last 20 years. Yeah.
So this is an area where there's a bit of dark practice going on.
Yeah, there's definitely an issue with people who might want to try to fake the left. However, I think in this case, it's just someone who's trying to make sure that people are thinking of left when they see this.
Having a fake signature on a fully accredited West is a bit of a shock, and a reminder that it takes more than an autograph to prove that a work is genuine. So have you compared both works? Does Beth believe Benjamin West produced Hughes' sketch?
I would have to imagine that it was someone, if not the artist himself, someone very close to the writer, who maybe even works directly with him.
Yeah, but he's not going to be very critically telling by someone who can't name who knew the artist very well and was very familiar with the artist's techniques. So,
Right, without primary documentation, it just can't guarantee, to say that this is definitely by luck, unfortunately.
well, we haven't been able to travel aboard. The paint sample that Eva took from the surface of his painting hasn't made its way to Amsterdam, and the results are bad. Have the team been able to identify at a molecular level evidence that could identify West as the painting's creator? What we know is that West used this great variety of organic materials, really exotic, daring colours, you could say, including things that was said like ground knives that would produce a sort of rich molded brown. Literally brown. And so, now we haven't found any of that in the literature. But exciting news from Classian, from the Weizmann Laboratory in Amsterdam. What Jan has discovered is a chemical called xanthan, which would almost certainly indicate the use of Indian yellow. Indian yellow is created from the dry urine of cows that have been fed on mango leaves.
And it must be someone fed on mango leaves to make it extra yellow.
Well, presumably a sort of super yellow or something.
No. Right, okay.
But this is where it gets interesting, because in the late 18th century, and around that period, a lot of artists claimed to use Indian yellow, but the reality was it was just too expensive. The exotic ingredients were beyond them.
So, if you were going to use Indian yellow, which you really didn't be fitting, you'd have to be a successful artist as an American one, successful artist like Indian West, for example.
Exactly. So the paints, the cost of paints narrowed down the range of possibilities to the artist.
So Benjamin West and his exotic papers, who knew? After the Christie's stencil on the back of his picture, it proved for us that his sketch was sold at auction in 1885 as a Benjamin West. We suspect the buyer was art dealer Martin Colnardi. Colnardi is one of the oldest art dealerships in Britain, and hoping its archives will reveal more. So it comes to a rather magnificent place they're held. was the manor in Buckinghamshire. You have kids already separated.
Thank you. Hello, your nice. How are you? I'm
Good, okay.
good. You like this? What? It's just cool. That's just cool.
You rich.
There you go, inside.
I'm hoping historian Jeremy House can confirm Martin Colnaghi was the 1885 wire and tell us where the painting went next.
Hello. Hello. Welcome to Watford.
Thank you very much. We're reception to this kitchen, which is on again, and we've noticed something. There is a Christie's stockman in the back, which suggests that it's sold through Christie's to an N. Cole. That's all we can see, and I'm assuming that's Martin Colnaghi. And I want to do the same on that.
Well, it could be Martin Colnaghi. The thing is, he didn't work for the family for very long. He was actually very good after he was regarded as having one of the best eyes in the business. On that.
Things that were architecture.
Yeah. And we have in the archive a miniature of Martin Colnaghi, and we bought your picture at one stage, which was done in 1908, the year of his death.
It's a very distinguished man today.
Was it today?
Can I say it?
I found it in the Haymarket.
Hang on.
Yes. There's a Haymarket staff on the
Exactly, it's on the back of his picture. Is that says modern religion, which is human.
Well, that's really interesting, because he would have been in the Haymarket in the 1880s. In the records, so unfortunately, I think it's possible to check that, because unfortunately, he died in 1908. He had no children, and as far as I know, the British record was actually destroyed in 1940, which is when the widow died. Again?
I was just actually questions after. I was like, what do you think with these people? I have to say, I thought that countries in New Zealand, you get some of the movie. You lifetime, but there's history of
I think we're going to be in touch more about the
once again, we're thwarted by this destroyed archive. And our progress trail is cut short. Thanks to the Christmas vessel and Haymarket name on the back of these pictures, we know for sure it was sold in 1885 as being the last supper by Benjamin West. No question. But there was forward to the 1960s when we know it came into possession of the English, we then sold it to you. We've got a gap between 1885 and the 1960s, about 70 years. So how we done now? What we do know, there was a Benjamin West last supper, it's missing, and it's almost exactly the same dimension as shoes. Is that enough? It's time to wrap up our investigation.
Rupert has completed the restoration work, and all we can now together.
Hello.
Hi, dear.
Hi, this is Rupert.
Oh, but you got to say this, oh. What's the way different, isn't it?
Rupert has dramatically rectified over 200 years worth of damage and mistreatment.
It's more like the quality of the thing rather than the fantasticness. The colours are strong, and they were all there, they just competed.
Yet by taking off the dirt, by putting out those cruciality, that atmosphere that was hinted at in the church, you've got that. It's got depth, the whole mysticism about it.
I love this line saying in the back of Egypt. I think that's really beautiful. There's a lot of things work on it. Very satisfying. It's not exactly like the finished painting, it's the first draft. I think it's good, it's not exactly the same, it makes it much more like it would be before rather than after.
There's one remaining problem. When the painting was sold at Christie in 1885, it was listed as signed and dated. Has Rupert uncovered anything to solve that?
Did you find a signature or go for the signature? Well, I think possibly yes. If you look bottom, slightly left of centre, below the spot on the tablecloth, what looks to me like a date, and then in front of that, the remnant of 4 letters. do you think? You know about it? I mean, there's absolutely no doubt about it. There's something there. If you hadn't pointed this out, I would never have known this was there. I just think it's not. Yes, but they're different marks, not in the same pigments as the drawing line, so if it's not a signature, I don't know what it is. The exciting thing is, even if we can't entirely read it, we know that the lost picture we hope this to be was once something. Line a complete West signature over the fragmentary remaining signature, I think it's a good fit. Yeah, but did you find out anything about the painting after Columbi's bolted? Gave it a good shot, but can't really know. So after Columbi, you know, we hit a bit with Eleanor, so we don't want to still elusive. I didn't receive too long, an unfurling cosmos that has every single name that is unbroken is quite rare. I mean, we've got a lot. I mean, you've done very well there. It's just not as tightly nailed down as I would imagine. And I know you'll feel with this squiggle, but it is still necessary. It's called signature. It's judgment time. Martin Potter from the Paul Bellamy Centre for Studies in British Art has been consulting with Columbia University's Professor Alan Staley, author of the Benjamin West Catalogue Resume. These are the people the art world trusts to authenticate the Benjamin West. They will be the ones to decide, is this the Benjamin West? And have we found the missing sketch? I have to say, throughout the whole process of researching this picture, I kept on, as it were, getting what feels like messages of Benjamin West's presence, in the way that he uses his colours and the lines that run throughout the composition. But as much as I wrote this, unfortunately, the decision is not mine. And the people who the art world will listen to on this will not necessarily share my view. Martin, very good to see you. I know you and Professor Staley have been considering these things. Yeah, it's a short trip. Pretty happy to see you. What do you think? Wow, it's a really interesting picture. What's the really linear painter? So even when he's using paint, he's thinking about composition lines. And here you can see, especially in this foreground and the figure of Jesus and the figure at the right, there's little kind of compositional lines that run right the way through it. It's absolutely feels like Benjamin West in every aspect. Fantastic. Really? Yeah. I think you can relax on that level. Yeah. No concern about it. And we're both in agreement that this is absolutely right. Final. Yeah. I think, having looked at the evidence, the problem is, there aren't many gaps in that record, and I think this is the picture that's sold by West Sons in 1829. I think it's that, it actually belonged to the family, and that's important. So, I also wonder whether it's the picture that West showed at the Royal Academy in 1804. It had an interesting life. Yeah, it had a very career. It's a rich history, it's a rich history. Which just shows also all those dark nights scrolling through the day, and then, well, find the painting, nobody was interested in it, and nobody did against me. And for you to do all the work and find out that it actually is a root song. It's very fulfilling. Just reminds, what did you buy for your dentist? Break mark. So what do we think now, Philip? You wasn't the founding father of American painting, as well as fishing to the king, so I think it's probably as zero to £50. I think it's £50,000. What about? That's good. In fact, you I think it's a very handsome object in its own right. So congratulations. That's the very well done. I know this picture has been cleaned, but now we know so much of the backstory, and we've had it all confirmed that there's no picture really seems to glow. It does, and she was certainly glowing after all that. Can't help being excited with these souls in the busy panels, but maybe it is. And here, in Huxley Mill Fishing House, he's still trawling through the internet with pictures. So here it is. You want to see that thing with it? If you think you have an undiscovered masterpiece or other precious object, contact us at bbc.co.uk/sacredfortune.
Hello, this is Randall Mills, art critic, documentary producer and presenter. And thanks for watching Perspective, YouTube's home for classical art. If anyone was ever to hold a competition, inspiring the craziest dictator in the world, who would you vote for? Obviously, the dreaded Cuba Jr. North Korea will get candidate. Well, Colonel Gaddafi or Libya. But if it was up to me, it wouldn't be a contest. There's only one winner, and that is the man they call Dr. Bashi, or, as he likes to call himself, Dr. Bashi, the Christian. Yeah, gorgeous to watch it. I believe that comes from that would be if you want to know all about Andy Warhol, just look at the surface of my paintings and films and me. And there I am. There's nothing behind it.
Andy Warhol, an artist who his entire life provocatively asserted that he only existed on the surface, that he was just a personality devoid of history and emotions. Hiding behind half-truths and genuine lies, Andy Warhol chose to wear a mask all his life.
The fascinating Warhol personality, he never gave anything away. It's important to realize that. He hid behind photos. You have to force the secret out of him. It's the question. Just what I drew, there is always an interplay between the simplicity of a painting and affluence or an image and something far more complex, which you discover little by little. People get economical or deception.
The whole world knows his famous paintings of Candle Simpkins and the multiple portraits of Marilyn Monroe. His face is his signature, and it has made him a star. He is one of the most famous artists of the 20th century.
And yet, very few people know the man hidden behind the artist. If we go back to the childhood of the man then known as Andrew Walhalla, we discover a complex being, influenced by family tradition, popular culture, and religion.
I don't think it comes down to one piece of art. If he wasn't religious, I just think a greater part of the theme of his art would be different.
It's important to understand the cultural practice of religion. Warhol's true origins are to be found there.
From these miscellaneous influences, which were so deeply rooted in him, he fashioned a unique world, an artistic and philosophic world, but also a cold one. His work is disturbing in its simplicity, and in direct confrontation with the upheaval of his time. Andrei Warhola and Warhol's father settled in Pittsburgh in 1912. He was joined several years later by his wife Julia, newly arrived from her native Slovakia. They came here to find work, lured by the promise of this land of freedom. Pittsburgh was the capital of the coal and steel industry, and its chimneys formed an imposing industrial landscape. This urban environment was frighteningly modern. The city was constantly expanding and became a symbol of a country destined to build the new century.
Pittsburgh is known for a very industrial city. Steel is very big here in Pittsburgh. Steel mills, they run every day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, 365 days a year. They don't shut down at all. And you can see it's very visible, the flames coming out, the smoke.
Historically, Pittsburgh was a city of opposites. On the one hand, you had the Brits, the Mays, and the Carnegies, the rich families who built these American cities, and on the other, all the workers.
Et de l'autre côté, tous les travailleurs.
Well, maybe this is mainly a lot of immigrant workers who came over. So that would be the poor side.
But the crash in 1939 brought the machines to a standstill, and one by one, the factories closed down. The youngest Warhola, Andrew, was only 1 year old, so his father, Andrei, could
Contact Liberal and Labour's $1 trillion of debt, with the UAP's 15% iron ore export licence on Asian manufacturing. Vote 1 United Australia Party. Also, by Clyde Thomas and the United Australia Party Britain. Save your home, maximum home loans below 3% for the next 5 years. Vote 1 United Australia Party and secure your family's future. Also, by Clyde Thomas and the United Australia Party Britain. Bring back from overseas the $1 trillion of Australian super to Australia. Inject it into the Australian economy. Save Australia, save your family's future. Vote 1 United Australia Party. Also by Clyde Thomas and the United Australia Party Britain. Now there is no more fear and no mistake. Sky is clear and gray. I know what I'll do. Gonna put my faith in a body true. Touching the nose away. To fight for me now every day. And that's my kind of body. The United Australian body. And that's my kind of body. The United Australian body. So tell me something young. You know we just begun to make Australia great. We got it in us, made United Southern Sons. So
my vote. Oh, let's change the course of Australian history. Well, let us follow around, we're gonna hit the ground, at the end of the road. I know what I'll do. Gonna put my faith in the light. And that's not
It's why we the family. The biggest country is Australia. We love Australia.
Welcome everyone, my name is James McDonald and I'm the lead Senate candidate for the United Australia Party in Western Australia. The United Australia Party is standing candidates in all 15 House of Representatives seats in Western Australia. In fact, we're standing 151 seats in representatives throughout Australia and Senate candidates in all states and territories. We are the largest political party in Australia with 82,000 members. Our candidates are enthusiastic and committed to doing all we can to make Craig Kelly our next Prime Minister. Over to you, Victoria.
My name is Robert Beck. I'm leading the Senate team in Victoria. The United Australia Party is standing in all 39 House of Representatives seats in Victoria. Victoria has suffered the world's longest lockdown under Dan Andrews. Our team has a strong resolve to protect our freedom and our liberties. Thousands of Victorians have joined our party, determined to do all we can do to serve our nation.
My name is Dominic Martino. I am leading the UAP Senate team in New South Wales. New South Wales has the largest number of members in the United Australia Party. I first joined the party in 2015. The Liberals locked down most of the city and destroyed many of our freedoms. The United Australia Party has a plan to repay Australia's debt. All of our 47 candidates standing for election to the House of Representatives of New South Wales have a strong resolve to serve the Australian people.
My name is Desmond Abidi. I'm standing with Clive Palmer, Martin Brewster and Jack McKay for the Queensland Senate. The United Australia Party will field candidates in all 30 seats in the House of Representatives. A 3% maximum home loan interest rate over the next 5 years will preserve the nation's wealth. Freedom forever. In South Australia, the United Australia Party is contesting all 10 seats in the House of Representatives. My name is Michael Arden. I'm leading the United Australia Party team in the Senate in South Australia. We have a strong resolve not to let our country down. UAP has pledged to provide $40 billion directly to hospitals to bring Australia's healthcare up to the standard expected by all Australians.
My name is Diana Adams, and I am leading the United Australia Party Senate team in Tasmania. The United Australia Party is standing in all 5 House of Representatives seats in Tasmania. All our party members are working hard to make Craig Kelly Australia's next Prime Minister. Freedom forever.
I'm James Savaletis, the Senate team leader in the Australian Capital Territory. The United Australia Party can repay Australia's $1 trillion of debt by having the purchasers of Australian iron ore paying 15% export licence fee on their purchases of iron ore. This will free all Australians from the burden of repaying Liberal and Labor debt.
My name is Taylor Self. I'm the United Australia Party candidate in the seat of Solomon in the Northern Territory. Our Senate team and all our members want to bring about a positive change for Australia and see Craig Kelly become Australia's next Prime Minister.
During our 5 a.m. in the morning, with our UA13 sending out our visual display of $1 trillion for the government debt. Now, reckless and wasteful spending by both Liberals and Labor parties.
We come here this morning as an army of here this morning since about 5 o'clock, setting up a bit of a display. We have a $100 billion note representing $1 trillion, which is almost about here. Each one of these notes, which represented here, is $1 billion, $1,000 billion. That's what $1 trillion is. The government has put us in the debt during the last 2 years.
We can show you visually just how much debt the establishment has put us in. Labour and Liberal, what I keep saying, we are two wings on the same bird. So how much debt are we in exactly? Not just us, but future generations that will come next. We'll check it out here. Okay? That's $1 trillion of debt. Over $1 trillion of debt. But how much is $1 trillion? Well, $1 trillion is 1,000 billion dollars, and $1 billion is 1,000 million dollars. That's how much debt there is. That's how much debt we need to pay back, plus interest. Plus interest. So if you want this to end, we need to put Labour, Liberals, the Nationals, and the Greens last on our ticket, because we cannot, not just us, our kids, cannot afford a debt like this to get any bigger than what it is right now.
And it's just another year where they tell us that they'll be throwing money at the problems that they created and expecting Australians to be thankful and happy about it. I know I don't need to remind anyone that this money they're spending isn't free money, it's our money. And as I say, you can't spend your way out of debt. And a message to ScoMo and his pals, you can only spend your way to election victory so many times. You've wasted our money, money that we've worked hard for too many times.
That $100 billion debt is now 1,000 billion. This is a debt that unless we set all the plans over the next decade, the payback is the current people that $1 million first debt, one country is enough for the government pressure and luxury. Now, we've got any plans from God 5 years or not to pay that. We've got any plans from Mr. Albanese on Thursday night to pay that. The only party in this country that have a plan to pay back $6 trillion, not Great One. We can ensure that this is not a debt that leaves the burden at children and grandchildren.
Permanently freeze fuel excise now. Reduce Australia's cost of living. Vote 1 United Australia Party. Authorised by Clive Palmer for the United Australia Party, Britain.
Asian manufacturers dominate world. Australian iron ore makes it happen. A 15% export license for iron ore exports can repay the $1 trillion of people and free work. Australia needs a new government that can repay the debt by using Australia's permanent position as resources. We need to increase your earnings, wages, and standard of living. We have one for the United Australia.
Authorised by Clive Palmer for the United Australia Party, Britain.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's now my honour to introduce to you our party chairman and lead Senate candidate in Queensland. He was deservedly named a National Living Treasure, and he was elected to the 44th Parliament of Australia as a federal member for Fairfax. Australia needs Clive Palmer and the United Australia Party now more than ever. Please stand with me and welcome to the stage
Took any job you could get. In the coal mines, in the steelworks, on building sites, you worked non-stop, relentlessly.
Andre was a hard worker. He was often away from home, and sometimes he didn't even have to travel. He would be home for days on end. But it was just his way. He was a workaholic.
When you came home, he was exhausted, you know, with his family.
Andy's parents responded to poverty by seeking solace in spirituality, by observing their religious traditions. Every Sunday, the little boy would accompany his parents and his two big brothers through the silent streets of the city. Come rain or snow, they walked for 10 kilometers to church. The Byzantine Catholic Church of St. John Chrysostom.
My grandmother was very religious, and she required that everybody in the family go to church and, say their prayers. The religious, segment of Catholicism is called Byzantine Catholic.
An incongruous island in the midst of a sea of greyness, this church in Pittsburgh was etched on little Andy's imagination.
He walked into the church and was totally intimidated. Your eyes are stimulated by all the beautiful, wonderful icons, like the gold screens, the dome, the stained glass windows. There was a very beautiful Byzantine Catholic Lutheran chant that the parishioners would sing, and again, very pleasing to the ear, as well as the use of incense. It's based off of sort of the premise of heaven on earth. So when you walk into the church, you're surrounded by beauty and this beautiful scent and this beautiful chant.
Andy was fascinated by these pious images. Opposite him, above the altar, was a painting of Jesus and his disciples at the Last Supper.
He liked to joke around where when he was maybe sitting in church as a little boy and he made an icon of Jesus and thinking, boy, that would really be neat if we could put Maryland and Shirley Temple up there.
30 years later, Andy Warhol, who had become Andy Warhol, painted his most famous painting, Gold Barrel in the Road, based on these religious icons. In it, the actress is immortalized as a saint on a gold background. Her features simplified by blocks of color. In 1934, Andy's father, Andre, finally found a permanent job. The Warhol's situation improved, and they moved into this house a stone's throw from their church. This house became a bubble for Andy, protecting him from the outside world.
Andy was an odd child, very different than his two older brothers, who were more advanced and played football. He was born with a delicate constitution and was soon afflicted by a nervous condition known as sleep-walker's dance. People suffering from this condition cannot control their movements or speech.
Ni ses mouvements, ni sa parole, et donc ne peut rien faire. Une maladie l'oblige.
This illness kept him off school for quite a long time, tied to his mother's apron string. He was delighted and spent his days drawing.
It was actually Julia, my grandmother, who took care of Andy, and she's the one that was really instrumental in showing him how to draw. I think that's where it all started. I always say that she was probably the biggest influence because she had a very unique artistic way about herself. She had this magical quality.
She would use a soup can and use paper mache and then flyers, and then she would sell those door to door. She would go into some of the more richer neighborhoods.
She was musical, she was artistic, she decorated days, she did a lot of sewing. So I think her talent rubbed off in Andy in a big way.
At the moment, we pay $2,455 a month at 2.19%. If you go to 6% interest, we'll be paying $3,898 a month.
That's an extra $1,433 a month, it's just way too much.
The United Australia Party comes to us with a maximum 3% interest rate that's going to save our homes and our future.
Save your home.
Vote one United Australia Party. Authorised by Ralph Whittle, the United Australia Party leader.
Space off in the air of the performance car, abundant across the center range, courtesy of its generous wheelbase and fastback design, with smart power tailgate, power sunroof, and NAPA leather seating for fire, creating the ultimate in Grand Touring luxury. Cabin fever need not trouble you again.
Kia, new Andrew Warholer was installed in the centre of the living room. He was treated like a king, the privilege of the seriously ill. Le privilège des grands malades. C'était une extreme His illness kept him away from other teenagers, stopped him going out with friends, having his first sexual encounters, his first love affairs. He was isolated when he left. Fréquent, il a eu l'expérience d'être empêché de faire, simplement. From a very early age, he got into the habit of observing.
C'est toujours force, alors quoi? His childhood was one of hardship and illness. He was a sickly child. He was teased at school. He was a mummy's boy and privileged too. His mother mollycoddled him, and so he suffered from terrible shyness, which he had to learn to overcome. Warhol really was extremely secretive. He wore a mask so that no one would know who he was.
Il y a un lien effectivement entre cet épisode de l'enfance. There was doubtless a link between this decisive childhood episode and his distant relationship with him. Considerably, it was as if he was looking at life through a glass window. Besides the camera, Andy only had one form of escapism from the disturbing reality: the cinema. In the 1930s, Hollywood was experiencing a golden age as the economic crisis dragged on. Americans put on mass in darkened rooms. By the age of 7, Andrew was a regular cinemagoer.
Instant investigative for the cinema, yet he was passionate about cinema. But that was normal in the 1930s, when the big studios were in their heyday. He was fascinated by America's sweetheart, Shirley Temple. He wrote her a note, and by some miracle he received a reply from Shirley Temple, which he showed to everyone. He was jumping for joy.
He was a true fan of Sex and Digital Girl, this child star who had been fashioned by the studios and appeared in all the most popular films.
For the children of that generation, the cinema provided a window onto the outside world. In that sense, Hollywood had the ability to fire up people's imaginations in a way that we don't really understand today.
La taille très claire aujourd'hui.
Istitucional Organização
Obviously, for any teenager in Andy's position, the vision of another world and the things that never imagined possible suddenly appearing on screen was quite magical.
Andy's parents realized he would not have the same future as his two brothers who were already in work. Despite their modest salaries, they managed, thanks to a bursary, to enroll him in drawing classes.
Andre, he doesn't come from an elite class. He's not very, educated in art, but he knew there was something special about Uncle Andy. And he knew that it was worth to save as much money as he possibly could to ensure that Uncle Andy got a college. And even to go further and to make that prediction that you're going to be proud of Andy someday.
Andre didn't live to see his son's success. In 1942, he died suddenly, poisoned by contaminated water on the building site. And he was 14. Deeply affected and incapable of confronting his father's death, he refused to go to the funeral. Three years later, he did his father proud and got into Carnegie Tech University. There he did courses in applied art, design, and graphics. But soon Andy was drawing attention to himself and caused his first scandal with this painting. A self-portrait, which he called "The Broad Gave Me a Face, but I Can Pick My Own Nose." His teachers were divided. He was very close to getting thrown out. But Andrew applied himself, and in 1949 he finally got his diploma. Aged 21, despite being anxious about leaving his mother, he realized that if he wanted to live off his art, he had to move. He headed for the new capital of art and the avant-garde, New York. Thanks to steel from Pittsburgh, the city had the world's biggest skyscrapers, plus the Empire State Building. Charlie Parker and Miles Davis played in the city's jazz clubs. And Jackson Pollock, with his abstract expressionism, ruled the contemporary art world. It was also the birthplace of Beat Generation writers such as Jack Kerouac and William Burroughs. On Times Square, Andy stood outside flashy cinema facades where the big stars were on screen. Marilyn Monroe, Elizabeth Taylor, and Marlon Brando. With only $200 in his pocket, Warhol moved to Manhattan. He lived in a small studio flat with a friend who was to become a great painter, Philip Palestine.
Les besoins à New York, c'est the two men experienced a brief period of bohemianism while living with artists in New York. They moved from flatshare to flatshare in a downtown that was not at all like it is today. All the neighborhoods in Lower Manhattan were seedy, flea-ridden, and full of cockroaches. They were teeming with young people trying their luck, but not all of them would succeed. Il a courir les rédactions de magazines de mode. Andy called around fashion magazine editing houses with a cardboard box full of drawings. Everyone was instantly seduced by his stylishness and boyish charm. He seduced the female editors of Vogue and Harper's Bazaar and other leading fashion magazines, such as Glamour, which commissioned him to produce a series of drawings. He had struck lucky. Une série de dessins et était finie.
As soon as he arrived, Andy got a commission from Glamour magazine for a series of articles entitled What is Success? He was an sketches of rather whimsical women. His drawings caused a sensation, and advertising contracts followed. The swankiest shops in New York called on him to dress their windows. It was around this time that he dropped the last letter of his name and started signing his work Andy Warhol, a much more American name. He became a successful young graphic designer. Then one day, out of the blue, his mother Julia turned up at his apartment.
He came in the talk in 1952. It was 2 years after he arrived in New York. He was determined that he would take care of Andy and live with him, and he was okay with that for the next almost 20 years. He was there in New York doing all his housework and taking care of him at home. And I think he was an important support for all through those years. And I think that it gave him kind of a security that no one else could give him.
In the morning, Uncle Andy and my grandmother, who I affectionately refer to as Bubba, Uncle Andy and Bubba would kneel down and say a prayer before he left. You say a prayer, it's a dangerous world out there, and you ask for God's protection so that you can come home.
She had this really very interesting handwriting, which was actually just a handwriting that everybody in the region where she came from, they all learned this type of handwriting. This was the standard. To people in New York, it was very odd and strange and kind of fun, and it didn't really fit anything that they knew. It was so foreign. And all the art directors, they loved this, and all of his clients loved it. And pretty soon she was doing entire pieces under Warhol's name. And she actually won 2 professional graphic design awards in New York.
Throughout the 50s, Andy Warhol's work went hand in hand with the dawn of the consumer society. With a string of prizes to his name and admired by his peers, he was now a rich man. Born poor to innocent parents, he had turned his life around. In 1960, he bought this 4-story house in the city's poshest neighborhood, on the east side of Central Park. As always, his mother followed him and moved into the ground floor. Andy started painting. He had made his fortune, so he could afford to do his own work and turn down advertising commissions. He was making work for himself. Trying out new things. At that time, his nephews regularly made the trip from Pittsburgh to see him. Some years later, James Warhol, who had become an illustrator, drew his comic strip based on childhood memories and visited to see his uncle. And with his discovery of Andy Warhol's very first work.
It was just a wonderful space for kids. And a lot of our memories are when we visited in New York at this townhouse. We remember when he was doing his first soup cans, doing these simple images of soup cans. They almost look like advertising art. They didn't look like fine art, but he did them well. So he was hand painting all these images, and we knew it took quite a talent, and we loved watching him do it. He would start working probably around 10 o'clock. He'd be busy all through the day, painting. He would be listening to music. One point, he realized my brother and I were really good workers, so he put us to work stretching canvases. So we were thrilled to help him stretch canvases at home. He was very exact on how he liked his canvases without any wrinkles, and we were able to do it. So when he was 7 and my brother was 9, we were doing that kind of work. That's when he was doing the the paint by number paintings, the dance step paintings, the dollar bills, just all their girl paintings, it was pretty thrilling.
The paintings started piling up in a small house. Andy condensed all his influences in his paintings. They contained everything that had shaped his lucid vision of the era. The dollar sign and the Campbell soup can were almost like religious icons of everyday life.
My mother, she was very direct with my uncle. I know that she didn't think any of it was art. So she didn't really take it too seriously, and she'd tell him. And I actually asked him, well, why didn't you get rid of all this stuff at home? That was kind of his art. And he always told her it was really important that someday it was going to be worth a lot of money. That was one of my uncle's kind of principles, that anything could be art. It doesn't matter what type of subject or what your medium is, anything can be art. I think that was an important principle, and I think that's what he based early pop art paintings on.
In 1962, he discovered a printing technique which allowed him to reproduce his work found in Finland on canvas. Print printing. It was a provocative way of turning creativity into production. The traditional art world may have found it shocking, but it opened doors in some urbane and dissident circles. That's when he met Emile D'Antonio, an artist agent famous for his innovation. That marked a turning point in Warhol's career as an artist.
Warhol travaille d'arrache-pied et un jour présente deux murals that he working non-stop.
One day he presented two paintings to Emile D'Antonio, who was famous in the art world for being a consultant with a nose for quality. Warhol showed him a painting of a bottle of Coca-Cola, painted in an expressive lyrical style with a lot of feeling. It contained trickles and gestures. It was about painting and paint. Then he showed him another painting of a bottle of Coca-Cola with no trickles and no gestures. And Emile D'Antonio said to him, "That's it. You must plough that furrow." That's direct identification with the model without commentary. Pop art speaks for itself.
La proposition, c'est de produire.
His suggestion is to set up a production line, to focus on quantity, to mass reproduce a single image. What does it mean to be swamped by images? The more you look at something, the less meaningful it becomes.
Plus on regarde quelque chose, et moins elle signifie.
In 1962, the critics got carried away. The Campbell soup can paintings were even nicknamed the Mona Lisa of the modern age. Warhol understood that pop art was factory art, the art of the present. His work made radical claims that consumerism and showbiz were the new religions of the 20th century.
Pour réussir à se débarrasser,
To get rid of his manner, gestural approach, he had to brainwash himself.
il fallait qu'il se défaire d'elle.
Whatever you say.
Il fallait qu'il se mette hors de lui, c'est-à-dire hors de sa sensibilité.
He basically had to distance himself from his feelings and become a machine.
C'est ni un projet marketing,
This was not a marketing project or a pose. It was a real artistic objective to invent a feeling.
une forme.
At the end of 1962, American pop art was born. As proof of his meteoric rise to fame, almost all of Warhol's work found fire to this one-man show at the Federal Gallery, one of the best-known galleries in New York. On set, we amassed media, Warhol compulsively read and collected all the newspapers he could find. On the 4th of June 1962, he came across the front page announcing the death of 129 people in a plane crash. With caustic irony, he printed a huge picture of it in the 2-meter square, reappropriating the paper's knowledge imagery.
Who had witnessed the widespread expansion of the media, it was clear that its exploitation of death had something about it that was both unbearable and crucial. His image was revealing of a new form of society that thought nothing of exploiting death in this brutal way. That was one of the salient features of the world he now fancies of it. Just like Marilyn's material beauty, the two go hand in hand. Remember that he decided to paint Marilyn on the day he learned of her suicide.
Celebrities, sudden death, car crashes, racist attacks. Andy Warhol dances anything but inoffensive.
Painting is commemorative for Warhol. It commemorates that which has disappeared forever. It is a way of keeping and preserving an image of what has been lost. The pathos of these car crashes is all the greater when the images show people who don't know. They are images of strangers, but they show the extent to which images of dead people are a key issue. Not just from a socio-philosophical point of view, but also from an aesthetic point of view.
This series shows the electric chair in Sing Sing prison. It is an empty, brutal throne. The violent symbol of a society where death and showbiz are intertwined. The house in Lexington had become too small for Warhol. He needed work assistants, and he had to find somewhere to store his mass productions. Meeting Gerard Malaga was useful. He was a student, a young poet, with a flamboyant mane of brown hair. In January 1964, they invested in a disused factory, which they covered in aluminium and silver paint. The Liverpool factory was born.
The other factory was the half factory. But we saw the space, it was empty, it was dark, it was gloomy, it was not very enthusiastic space, but maybe said something about the door. So we kind of leave and then we moved into the space.
It had a lift like the ones you used to get in old lofts. The lift door opened straight onto the loft. There was no front door or anything.
He loved surrounding himself with crazy people, people who just rock and cross-dress.
He said Warhol really liked certain people. I think he liked people in general. I think he really studied, personalities, and he liked having a lot of different people. And I think this idea of mixing really amazing people from high society and low society, and maybe kind of create some friction, see what happens.
The factory was a place to hang out in and meet people. It was a place of spontaneous experimentation. Very soon, a modern hybrid lifestyle developed there. Work, artificial paradises, and all-night parties all merged into one. Andy Warhol created his own superstar there. These men, women, and transvestites were models and muses. Fashioned in the image of the Hollywood dream factory of his childhood. The place acted as a magnet for fashionable New Yorkers. Andy Warhol always remained slightly aloof. He was both at the centre of things and in the background, a voyeur.
People thought that everyone was hanging around me at Thatcher, but it was the opposite. I was hanging around them.
We didn't really know what was going on at the factory, and at the same time, he didn't really bring too many people home from the factory, so he liked it that way, I think, because at home he had his privacy, a certain amount of peacefulness, and especially his mother, who took care of him. I think that was really important for him to grow as an artist.
In 1965, out of the blue, Andy Warhol announced that he was going to stop painting and focus on filmmaking.
I remember at that time, in the mid-60s, when he said he was giving up painting, and it just didn't make sense that he would give up painting when he became so successful. But then he was doing film, and there again, I don't think anybody understood the films because they were kind of artsy, strange films.
New York was going, and not only in New York, but also the West Coast, San Francisco. There were new movements in cinema to expand the forms of cinema from just narrative, storytelling, Hollywood kind of public cinema into poetic forms of cinema, not just forms of cinema.
Derek Nicholas, a pioneer of experimental cinema, ran the only New York cinema showing underground film.
The first series of films Andy brought to me were a series from 50. He decided to project it, not a normal film, but rolled down. That's what we do wrote. We could project it 24 seconds. It's boring, that's realistic. But when you slow it down, you will become quite super reality. A little bit of a dream with those things and reality. What in the air at that time, in all of the art, was like art in time that he brought it to cinema. Main contribution was to go back to the origins of cinema and to reinvent it. He was in there of the people.
Using primitive filmmaking techniques with no editing, Warhol observed day-to-day life. His films are like pictures, very moving. His filmmaking was a continuation of his painting. At that time, Agnes Varda, the director of Claretta Santa Fe, was also working on temporality in films. She was in New York, and she had come to the factory because she had plans to work with one of Warhol's superstars, Eva. Andy was pleased to see us. He gave me a warm welcome and spoke about this and that. I told him I wanted to be in scene with her. Eva, much work with her. She made a wonderful film. Cleo from 5 to 7. If I had made it, I would have shot from 5 to 7. He would have made it in 2 hours. It took me 2 months. I loved that. Coming from France, we stuck to tradition, and we didn't follow rule books, especially in the 60s. They were all moving away from traditional conceptions, and Warhol was a wonderful pioneer for that. His most radical film was Empire. It was a static shot of the Empire State Building, shot in July 1964. Screened in slow motion, the film lasted 8 hours, with no shot changes.
People really hated the movie. You know, the movie, so we turned Empire and the movie theater. People were probably thinking this is strange. And Andy was getting worried that he was standing in the back of the field and said, do you think they really hated? Oh, yeah, I would think that.
He revolutionized filmmaking, simply by taking on issues of time and continuity. I mean, it's important that someone did that. It doesn't mean people are going to rush to see the films at the cinema, but his films marked a turning point for me in the history of filmmaking. We didn't look at time in the same way after that. I think there was filmmaking before Andy Warhol and filmmaking after him. Andy Warhol shot nearly 60 films over 5 years, experimenting with filmmaking on so industrial scale that he made paintings. He dreamt of running his own avant-garde studios and wanted to see his name associated with a rock band. In 1965, he went with Gerard Miranda to a concert at Café Bazaar. Velvet Underground were playing.
So we actually went down to see him perform. This was a matinee. Like, I don't know, 3 o'clock in the afternoon in this cafe in Sharon Village. There was no stage, it was just the stage floor. And there was tables with young kids that was different tables. It wasn't an auditorium or anything. And I just happened to have a list with as a fashion accoutrement just beside at myself. And at some point I took the whip off myself and I started dancing with the whip while they were performing. Well, within 5 minutes, everybody at the table got up off their chairs and they started dancing too. No one was dancing at the beginning.
Warhol was tentatively seduced by their raw and poetic style. It was filled with erotic, wild lament with crude lyrics. Warhol offered Velvet to use the factory to rehearse in.
Nobody took it seriously. Nobody felt at that time that it would be that important. Actually, we thought that Luca, I think he was just a very bad singer, and it was just part of the flight. Lou Reed, he and Andy kind of connected, I think, with something special happened. They were both breaking new ground, and I think that it was an exciting period being there in New York, doing what they were doing. That was part of my uncle's concept of bringing it all together in one big kind of artistic performance.
Velvet became part of the factory, giving it a new, more rock and underground identity. Punk before its time. It was a hysterical time, with more and more people turning up at the factory. In 1968, the spirit of provocation and impertinence gained momentum. It was a violent and worrying time in the history of America.
CBS News in New York with a special report on Martin Luther King, the aftermath.
The assassination of Martin Luther King triggered riots in most of the big cities.
The community is fairly angry, often uncontrollably angry.
In the spring, the building housing the silver factory was to be demolished and had to move out. Warhol found the ideal place in this building in the south of Manhattan. A new factory which was to be the scene of a tragic episode. One of the really wonderful people hanging out in the factory was Valerie Solanas. She was openly gay and had just published the Scum Manifesto, a radical feminist pamphlet. That Valerie was crazy. She belonged to a group called Scum, Society for Cutting Up Men. One day, Valerie Solanas offered Andy a film script. The title was Cut Your Ass. He wasn't interested, and after a while, he announced to her that he had lost the script. On the afternoon of the 3rd of June 1968, Valerie Solanas showed up at the new factory again.
She was waiting in the lobby, and they actually rode the elevator up. She got her and we had a phone conversation with the guy. I guess she was at some beauty salon, having her hair done. Someone had pulled out her gun and shot him. While he was on the phone. Well, it was crowned silver like this when the bullet hit, and so it came through the side like this instead of this way, and passed through like something like 5 or
when being got to the hospital, he was very near death. He had lost a lot of blood. They operated for about 5.5 hours. After the surgery, he was laying in his hospital room, and he thought that he had died because he could hear on the television that Kennedy had been shot. Young Robert Kennedy first one thing. He thought that that's what happened when he died. He lived history, and he had no idea that it was Robert Kennedy who had been shot. This is what he claimed anyway. My oldest brother, Paul, who studied with the priest, he stayed with my uncle for a few months during that summer. It was a really traumatic experience for everybody, and for especially my uncle, because it took him many months to recover from that.
He was discharged after 2 months of convalescence. He'd come through it, but he was very weak.
He said, I'm a survivor.
That wonders what not. He said he felt as if he were living in another world, a much more uncertain world. He said he thought he was only afraid of God, but that's all changed now. That photograph is incredible. It's a record of what he went through. It also shows his ability to rise above it. Those are the stigmas of a man who almost died. They are proof of what he endured and of his resurrection.
It was a big turning point for his career. I think his work had changed. I think his personality changed as well. I think it was just a way of him shifting and being more careful. The creativity is definitely, I think, a step back.
In the years that followed, Andy Warhol was fearful, and his fear was deeply rooted. He was so traumatized, he made a clean sweep. His former associates left the factory. No more superstars, no more money. By giving up this community which had inspired him for all those years, he lost his creativity.
For me, the hospital there for him, the 70s were empty years. Perhaps that's what his work has been with in the 70s. Emptiness.
In May 1969, Esquire's cover featured Andy Warhol drowning the Tina Campbell Sea. The headline was unambiguous: the final decline and total collapse of the American avant-garde. In 1970, Andy Warhol carried on creating his voice around him and sent his mother to Pittsburgh to live with his brothers. Julia died on the 22nd of November 1972. As with 30 years previously on the death of his father, Andy didn't go to the funeral and didn't speak to anyone about his mother's death. A new factory was born out of his fears, the office. Now no longer be obsessed with death, he sought refuge in the practice of compulsively recording everything. His tape recorder and Polaroid camera never left his side. He changed, hiding behind his viewfinder as a way of seeing without being seen, of being present but not really there.
He endured that high and low line. He was constantly criticized by the New York art establishment that he was going out too much. Here's what his work and was to be out in the world. He was tape recording everybody. He was videotape all the time. He was taking Polaroids of people. That documentation at this time was part of his art and what he wanted to do.
Andy Warhol changed worlds and environments. He was gradually moving into the world of money.
This was something quite different. These were businessmen. They carried briefcases. He was no longer directing film. He was interviewing people and making television programs. There was a complete change.
1971 is beginning really doing portraits. So he was a business manager and confidant, and Bruno Bischofberger was listed in New York, really developed this idea of doing portraits and making a way of making money. And he understood the art historical importance of that, because in the history of art, the course of Europe always had portraits commissioned to these wealthy people at the time of the war.
During the 70s, Warhol sold his talent. Mick Jagger, John Lennon, Grace Jones, and numerous other stars commissioned portraits. He produced between 50 and 100 of them a year for astronomical sums. This work was neither personal nor political, he just planned them out. These portraits tend to overshadow his return to darker and more intimate work. In 1976, Warhol made Struggle, a three-printed series of 60 skulls. As if returning from the dead, he seemed to drop his mask and confront his audience head-on, revealing his mystical obsession for the first time. In 1978, he produced the mysterious Shadows. These abstract shadows will be produced ad infinitum. They gave us a glimpse of his obscure hallucinatory dreams.
There is a possibility that he was becoming more spiritual in his work and a little more introverted, but the abstract painting.
The shadow paintings really made the art critics stop in their tracks. Because they didn't know what to make of it. They are so spiritual, so material.
Warhol's late works are just as extraordinary as his early works. They are prodigious. What with the shadows, the camouflages, the diamonds, and the fish paintings. They are just as interesting as his early works, like an apple tree blossoming before it dies.
Andy Warhol seemed to sense the arrival of his own death. His works are now openly religious. His final work in 1987 was a variation on Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper.
He painted the Last Supper in 1986, shortly before his death. Most have painting illusions in their living room or kitchen, wherever they ate. They would have that some sort of picture, a resemblance of the Last Supper, to remind them of that very important event. That was a part of his life that he didn't talk much about. But I mean, at that point in his life, he really needed to get it out. His way of communicating, it wasn't like he was going to stand on top of the soapbox and say, hey, I'm religious. That was his quiet way of saying, look, I am very religious, and this is important to me, and I'm going to paint something that's very close to my heart. Yeah, that's sensitive, but you definitely won't know.
That's the advantage of success. It liberates you from a number of constraints. He exploited that success to do something he had wanted to do for a long time. He could now pick up the Christian theme again and use it as a subject matter of his painting. He made explicit what was implicit in a number of his paintings from the 60s.
On the 22nd of February 1987, Andy Warhol died, aged 58, of a heart attack following a routine gallbladder operation. In New York, 2,000 people attended a mass to pay tribute to him. The speeches made by the artist's militant doers gave the public a glimpse of just how religious he had been.
We went for after his death, we go to a homeless shelter in New York and hang out with the homeless the whole day. And he didn't tell us. And it's probably not the image that most people think of Andy Warhol, but I mean, all the other stuff is there. You know, this is just another side that makes him that much more intriguing and special.
And we never talked about personal things very much. I would like to touch upon this thing. I always enjoyed the church. We picked him up on a Sunday when the sun stopped because the church nearby. And so we went everybody outside, we go in for a few minutes and come back out. He didn't talk about it. This was all private.
The personal contact that I had with him, and he was always interested in what I was doing, and he'd tell me something new that he was doing. You know, he was always up learning before us, so,
He knows how to reach places with dark eyes, even underneath the top end, or you can get a smart, rich, ultra-expensive, you know, a 5,000 teeny micrometer reach for a clever thing. My name is Stanley Tucci. I've written and directed a film which just premiered at the Berlin Film Festival. Final Portrait has been a labor of love, which I have researched for more than 2 decades. Okay, that's so. It tells the story of an artist and personal hero of mine, Alberto Giacometti. I've been searching for the truth of this enigmatic and obsessive man. And in this documentary, I'm going to try to play his one. The more I've learned about him, the more I wanted to see his work, and I wanted to know more about him. I remember I went to the Pompidou Museum and going through and had all kinds of contemporary art, and it was sort of chronological and what I remember. And then suddenly, in the middle of the museum, is this room filled with Giacometti. And it hit me. And I was so moved by them, overwhelmed by them. And I saw that what he did was what everybody else I had just looked at for the last 45 minutes or so. That's what they were trying to get to. The human condition expressed through art, carried it down to its absolute essence. Born in Switzerland in 1901, Giacometti is best known for his 6 thin human figures, which are now the most highly priced sculptures in the world. But it's not just his work that fascinates me. It's also the way he lived. Although rich and famous in his lifetime, he lived in squalor, in the same tiny Paris studio, keeping wads of cash under his bed, frequenting prostitutes, and getting into scrapes with the underworld. He lived in this unorthodox way until his death in 1966, and yet maintained his pure artistic vision to the end. I'm going to meet artists, experts, and old friends of Giacometti to find out how his life and work came together to make him a towering figure at 20th century art. Well, I grew up in Westchester County where my dad was an art teacher in what you would call a state school here. And on the weekends or even after dinner at night, my dad would sketch you or draw you and maybe do a little painting or something. But you know, it's a really